All right, I think I might be ready, and that's for like a special interpretation of ready. I just want to start this with saying that this talk is going to be a lot slower. It's a lot less prepared, and there's going to be a lot less things that are working. So this is a part of my campaign for showing that anybody can talk at a meetup, even a person who has only like briefly talked about a thing and not really prepared, but just wants to share something. So interpret all of these errors as an opportunity for doing better than me next time, if you want to. My talk is about writing custom eslint plugins. And before we go further than the title, who has ever used a linter for JavaScript? For example, eslint. That's a lot. Who is not comfortable explaining how a linter works? Okay, so a few people wouldn't be able to explain that. So I can try and attempt that. A linter analyzes your source code. It creates what's called an abstract syntax tree, which is like the representation of your code that the machine will work with. It can apply different rules to that syntax tree and tell you if you did things right or wrong, which is the job of a linter. So what a linter can do for you is it can help you spot mistakes in your code. We saw, I think I only spotted like 1 or 2 examples of that in Morten's talk. So he had like a nice black square up here, which was a terminal, and the linter would pop up and tell him while he was typing that something was probably not able to run. So this is very useful because you get immediate feedback during your development to say what went wrong, where did it happen. You can integrate that into your editor so you can actually see in your code where do I need to look, what's the error message. This concept is pretty old. It has existed since probably the 70s or 80s. It came to JavaScript through Douglas Crockford a couple of years back. He was extremely opinionated on how you would write JavaScript. So he wrote this tool called eslint. Since then, the community has abandoned the concept of Crockford is always right and created linters that are more pluggable, where you can combine your own configuration in a way so you can shape your workflow as you want it to. The reason why I looked at writing my own linter plugin is because I was starting up a project internally in SiteImprove here, where we are looking at rethinking the way we do translations in our front end. Because it's from a time where we didn't know the entire scope of the problem, and the implementation is just lacking in different ways. So I'm kind of rethinking that. And one of the things that I came upon is that we should probably use this way of this template format for translations, which is called message format. And one of the nice things about message format is it has solutions for a lot of the problems that you would usually have when you do translations and internationalization, like plural numbers or gendered words and stuff like that. And the reason why this is nice, it is a standard that describes how a translator can come in and actually write a syntax that lets the translator, who knows best how the grammar of a specific language works, and they can instruct how things will be written. The problem with this is that this is a new format, and it's literally a template format inside a string inside your JavaScript, which is not super nice. So there is ample opportunity to do things wrong. And I thought maybe we can use the linter to help us give some feedback on what I am doing wrong and how I can fix it. So you can write template strings like these. Here is an example of a template string that will have a gendered he, she, they liked this. And this is one of the simple examples. It gets more complex like that. This is not about message format, but this is just to show that there's basically what is a template language inside a string. It's not super nice. One of the things that we could do and probably will do is write a VS Code plugin that will make the syntax highlighted inside your editor, maybe come up with suggestions based on the knowledge of the language. But what I wanted to do first is, and I'm switching over to the example code, I want to have a function called i18n. And that takes 2 arguments. Is this big enough? Could probably be a bit bigger. Okay, now I have no space at all. There we go, but it's readable. So i18n is a translation function. It takes a string, which is the thing you want to show to your user. And if you have any replacements that go into the templating string, you will pass that as a second argument, as a data object that is a key value thing. So I can write hello world, and that'll work already. So now I'm interested in maybe passing in some data. So I can say name, and let's just pass in a fixed thing. Peter, that's me. And now you might notice that there's a red squiggly line over here on my string. And this is because I wrote a custom eslint plugin, which tells me that I'm sending in a placeholder to this i18n function, but I'm not using it anywhere. I probably should. So I can write name. Oh no, that was wrong. So now I made another mistake. Now I have a placeholder called name, but it says that I'm probably missing the misspelled name in my data object. If I fix it, the linting mistake goes away. So this can help me keep the discipline of writing this unfamiliar templating syntax by using behind the scenes. It uses message format JS and creates also an AST of the templating language, and then I compare the data. This is not a good example to dive into, but I wrote a different plugin which does another thing. So down here you see a React component, and Morten introduced us to React. So this is a bit simpler than what Morten did. This is a div. It has a title, it has a foo attribute, and it has some string content. And I've tried to write which content should be translated and which should not. So in my daily workflow, one of the easiest thing to do is to just write your content, write your front-end component, and forget to call a translation function. So when I deploy this code, it'll be in English, even though I'm actually showing it in German. That's very annoying. So I would like to be reminded that I need to call a translation function around the stuff that should be translated, like the content. And the way I can do that is I can enable another rule that I've built. And then it says, you have a single child of a JSX element. It is a string literal. This should be translated. And if I hover, it tells me that because I wrote that in my rule. So this is very nice. This can help me keep my discipline on how I write things and avoid accidental mistakes and accidentally untranslated content that I'm sending out to the user. And let's have a look at how this is implemented. I can just remember which one it is. So this is an eslint plugin. Let me see if I can remove this one. There's a bunch of boilerplate here, like the module exports meta blah blah blah. This is to instruct eslint on what type of problem this plugin is working on, this rule is working on. It has a create function, which takes a context, which is a way of addressing things that are core functionalities of eslint. It returns an object which has identifiers of abstract syntax tree nodes. So what eslint does is it creates this abstract syntax tree of your code, and it basically traverses through each of the nodes in the tree. And what I'm saying here is that when you hit a JSX element, could you please call this function and pass in the node? And then I can look at the node and try and see if I can understand what it does, analyze it, and create an error from it if I need to. So what I do here is, let me just show you. So I don't know this by heart. Like I've worked with abstract syntax trees before, but not very often. Nobody can remember this shit. So there is a nice website here called AST Explorer. On the left-hand side, you can write your JavaScript code. On the right-hand side, you get the abstract syntax tree. You can choose which parser you want to use. In my case, I'm using Babel eslint 9, which is the parser that runs in eslint, which means that when I write JavaScript code on my left-hand side, on my right-hand side, I will see an inspectable abstract syntax tree. And there's a really nice thing about this interface. So if I just write a key here, you can see that if I click around in the source code, it says, okay, now I'm in a comment. And if I click here, it says, oh, I'm in the body of my program, I'm in an expression statement. This is a string literal, and the value of it is foo. Right? So nodes like these, each of these things, like the literal, the expression statement, these things are what gets sent in as a node to my callback once I've hit the filter, the whitelist filter in eslint. So that means now I can programmatically explore it. I can say that if there is a specific string that has the value foo, I want to throw an error, for example. So in my case, I have an example like this. Very simplified. I am, in the case of this specific plugin, I am looking for string literals that are single children of JSX elements. So I just write a JSX element in my left-hand side. I click the thing that I want to identify and say, okay, here's a JSX element. It has a property called children, which is an array. And for each item in the array, I can check the type. So this is a string literal. So I can set up a rule that says, walk through the children of the node. Give me only the things back that are string literals, maybe trim them. In case you're not interested in whitespace nodes, I'm not. And then I can throw an error that says, if you have a literal child that is a string inside a JSX element, you call context, which was the thing that lets us address things outside an eslint, .report, which means that now I'm throwing an error in eslint or a warning. I can pass it the node, which means that this is what decides what gets squiggly lined in your editor. So you can point it specifically to a node. In my case, I'm showing the string that I want to highlight. That's where the error is. And then I can put a message. And then that shows up like this in your editor. Or on your console if you fail. Yeah?
Why is it that you only would want to do that when there's a single string literal?
That's a good question, because that's the next thing. So that's a really good tie-in. There are multiple cases. There could be multiple nodes. Let's say, yeah, exactly. Let's say I have a span, or let's say I can type first. I have a span and says hello. Now I have multiple children. So now you can see it's highlighting this as an error because it's not translated, and this hello inside the span as well. This is nice because now I can see I made a mistake. But it's also really annoying because now I get these red squiggly lines. It's interrupting my workflow. Wouldn't it be nicer if it just fixed it for me? And there are different ways you can do that. eslint lets you actually write a function that's called fix on each error report that you send back. And that lets you actually modify the code automatically. And then it does another pass and lints it again. So here's actually an interesting case because I have my div has multiple children. My span has only one child. So what my goal is to achieve that this code gets just automatically for me translated from what it was before to this, which is a way of in JSX escaping into JavaScript land and then calling my translation function. So what I have up here is a special case. If my length of my literal children is exactly 1, then I know how to fix it. If I have multiples, I might need a special message format string that has placeholders that get dynamically injected. I don't know how to automatically fix that yet. Maybe I do eventually. But I can trigger a different report. It's the same node, it's literal child, it's the same message, but this time it has a fix function. The fix function it gets called with a fixer callback. I have no clue what that is. There's an API you can look up. I just did that, just read like whatever I needed and tried. It says that I can replace text where I pass in the the node that I think is the problem, and I just replace it with raw text. In my case, I'm replacing the raw text, hello, with the tuple or whatever those brackets are called, i18n, function call, ping to get a string, and then the value of the node itself. And that means that if I run fix, eslint, fix all auto-fixable problems. Thank you. Now it does the thing for me, right? So now I can, if I have enabled auto-fixing mode, which in our development setup, we have implemented eslint as a plugin for Webpack. Webpack runs in a watch mode. Anytime I save, eslint gets called. And eslint, well, Webpack is running in watch mode, it's also fixing the things. I can literally write HTML, just write the strings, and I'll get this fixed for me as I go along. And then I don't miss out on the translations once in a while. This one didn't get fixed. That's because there are multiple children, and this would have to be converted to message format, probably. Or at least the developer has to take some choice here. Maybe it can be translated as it is. So that's one of the examples. But there's another one up here. Like there's a title, and the title also needs to be translated. And I thought, let's do some live programming. So you can really see how bad it can get when you're not on the machine that you're used to working on. So I have cheated a bit because I'm not as good at writing code as Morten is. And I have created a linter, which is, so now I'm gonna cheat in the way that we're gonna comment all this out and write it again, so we can follow along what's gonna happen here. So what I want to achieve is that in my example.js, I want to translate the title attribute because I know that the title is a thing that is specifically targeted at my user. At SiteImprove, we take accessibility quite serious. Title is sometimes visible. It might be an RA label, which is never visible to a sighted user, but will get read out by the screen reader. So that has to be translated as well. And that's one of the very easy mistakes to miss, because as a sighted user, you don't see it in your daily workflow. So these plugins can really help you to up your game accessibility-wise, for example. So let's try that out. The first thing we need to do is go to AST Explorer. I already prepared this thing where there is a title and it is a hard-coded English string. I put the cursor there. I can see that I'm now in a structure where I have a JSX opening element. As part of the JSX opening element, I have a JSX attribute. This is representing sort of the HTML attribute. It has a name and it has a value. So let's try and identify those first. And that was over here. So I get a, what is it I need to return? I need to return, who can remember? Yeah, right. I need to return what I want to match on. So JSX attribute. If I wanted to combine like multiple contexts, ARIA has this thing where you can ARIA can reference other things. You might want to match on the JSX element instead. In my case, I think the attribute will be enough. So I'm gonna take do a function. I'm gonna send in a node, and this is gonna be like an attribute linting rule. And with this node, which I expect to be this guy here, I can check the value. So I can first say, no, I want to check the name. So I can say if node.name, name.name. How nice. .name triple equals title. This is going to be very explicit. And I can say if node.value. Oh. It would be value if I want to match specifically on the thing that is in there. In my case, I'm interested in, is it a string literal? Because if it is, it probably should be translated. If it's a reference of some sorts, then Who knows? You need to fix it somewhere else, right? And if like I think eventually I could write full tree traversals in this, so I could say if it's a reference to a variable, I could probably like step out in the tree, figure out where the variable is defined, and see if that is actually a translation function. I'm not that far yet. I'm at literally just looking at what's in AST Explorer. So one day, maybe I do that. Node.value, and I look at .type. When I started working with this, I would expect that a string literal would be called string literal. Not so. It's just called literal. So if I have an attribute name, then the name is title. The type is a literal. I can say context.report, and that is an object, and it has a node where you can point it at something to squiggly underline, and it has a message. There we go. And the node, I can take this one. And then it has a lot of linting errors, and luckily I can call a formatter and it fixes some of that for me, so you can see how that also helps the workflow. These are other plugins. So now I have something that hopefully will be able to identify that I have a title which points to a string literal, and that's wrong. And let's see if that works. And here is where I'm going to run into some problems, because for reasons unknown to me, the eslint plugin in VS Code doesn't know how to automatically update when things update. So I need to close this thing and open it again. And then I need to wait for all the plugins to boot up and do their thing. And then I'm really hoping that we'll see a red squiggly line here. Yes, but in the wrong place. I need to enable it, which means I need to reboot my editor again. Oh, let's keep that one. That was good. Yeah, typo, that's nice. So if you start out with this is actually one of the things that caused me some headache. In eslint, you cannot just require a new rule or a plugin with require in Node. You need to do this weird thing where you address it by some sort of a weird namespace, which is a string. And this cannot be a local path to a file. So you need to do either one of two plugins, and one of them doesn't work on Windows. So I tried that. You need to use the one called local rules, which is set up like this as a plugin, and then you need to write a stupid file, which basically says that, okay, the file is over here. Yeah, that's, that could be better. So they're not done developing this. I enabled the rule. It worked. What do you know? It also says something up here that the definition for a rule was not found. Matthias, how did we fix this when we tried this? Is it a typo? Oh, I haven't saved it. There we go. I love mob programming. We do this at work sometimes as well. Then we just put things on the big screen and then everybody just looks at it and says, this is wrong. Okay, it actually worked. So, but not quite as I expected it to, because now we're suddenly highlighting the entire attribute, not just the value. And what's actually wrong is that I have a string, like the title is not wrong. That should actually be there. So we can change the attribute to say, okay, it shouldn't be the node, which is this one over here. It should probably be the node dot value, right? So if I put node dot value, then let's see how it deals with automatic updates. Can I do eslint disable? Eslint enable? Nah, I'm gonna reboot it. This, by the way, also took me a long time to figure out, why isn't it updating? What am I doing wrong? But I can see from GitHub that somebody has opened this as an issue, and it should apparently be fixed in 2016. Not so on my machine, so who knows? So now we actually have identified that I have a string literal on a title attribute, and that's probably wrong. And it tells me that I should fix my translations. So this is not generic enough. Like there are multiple attributes that we probably know may contain user-facing values. So we can maybe abstract that a bit. Up here I cheated already. I have like an attributes to replace, which is title, area label, placeholder, which might be used on inputs. Those are all visible to the user. So we can, for example, say if attributes to replace dot includes node.name.name, then you should fail the linting rule. So now it'll work for area label for placeholder as well, but it won't bother me with foo because it doesn't know that foo is necessarily targeted at the user. So this foo might be a React attribute. If this is like some component that takes multiple properties, this might just be a string literal property, which is a part of the configuration. Yeah, it might be whatever. So I don't care about that one. So I'm whitelisting which ones I think are user-facing. So if I can help myself here, so I can do a fix function, if I recall correctly, and that is a function which takes a fixer, whatever that is, and that will return fixer dot, what did we have before? I'm just gonna copy paste whatever we had here. Replace text, and that is node.value, and we will send in. So this is where I'm in an attribute, so I need to escape into JavaScript land by doing these brackets, and I'm calling i18n with a string, and the value of the string will be node.value .value. How awesome. Format document, and if I'm lucky, this works. So let's see about that. Let's see if it needs to reload. Fix all auto-fixable problems. It fixed none of them. We're gonna reboot. I really want them to fix this part of the workflow because it's really hard to actually iterate on it. There is a guide on eslint's documentation page that shows you how you can write your own plugins, which is actually fairly good. Like I only read probably like 5% of eslint's documentation to be able to get to this point. So it's not like I'm good at studying or anything. I just did what I needed. But it would be nice to have like a better flow for this. Let's see if the fixing works. Yay! So this means if I run in a watch mode, in autofix mode, I can make these mistakes and I'll just get them fixed for me automatically. And I think this will be useful when I am trying to convince the developers of SiteImprove in general to switch to a thing that they're not used to. So all of these small things help. So that's what I had. Fix your stuff automatically. That's really nice.